we're qualified experts who know things about packaging. Hey everyone, welcome back to Do What You Can for the People, the show that nobody asked for. I'm Nicole, your hostess with the mostest, and I'm here today with two of my dear friends. They are both circular economy and packaging nerds, and I'm so excited to have them on this show. I have Emma, who manages supply chain operations and sustainability at Archer Roos, a sustainable wine company, and Stephanie, who is the sector lead and manager for textiles and apparel at Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute. Hey guys, thank you for being on the show today.
Great to be here, Nicole.
I've invited these two lovely ladies to come on to the show and talk a little bit about sustainable packaging solutions because it's something that we're all really into and nerd out on a lot, and we'll get into some of the ways that we've done that later on in the show. And really what we want to talk about, and we'll get to this even later, is about convenience culture. So I thought maybe, ladies, if it's okay with you guys, we could kind of talk a little bit about the packaging problem, which is something that all of us really, I think, came together in the first year of our MBA program with the Circular Box Company. So just to set the stage a little bit, we had a pitch competition in the first semester of our MBA program, the Bard College MBA in Sustainability. And the three of us plus Aileen had a little team, and we pitched a sustainable solution for packaging in the retail sector for e-commerce. And this really came from seeing that there's a really big packaging problem as e-commerce grows. So we like to start the show off with some facts and figures. So let's do that. In 2019, consumers worldwide spent nearly $3.46 trillion online. And in 2018, 87 billion packages were delivered worldwide. If you do the math, which I did, that comes out to 2,760 packages every second that are being shipped. Any thoughts on those numbers, ladies?
You can go if you want, Stephanie.
I was just going to say that's a lot of packages. And of course, I don't know if we have any stats around returns, right? I mean, because the stuff has to go back. And a lot of times, you know, I don't know, for me, for example, I'm collapsing the boxes I've received. Then I have to send something back, and maybe I go to UPS and have to buy another box there to send the thing back. So, yeah.
So a lot of packaging. A lot of packaging. And I think something that I've heard in my part of the world is that, oh, but it doesn't matter so much because we're using cardboard, and cardboard is a more sustainable solution. And I think it is definitely better than, you know, using those plastic mailers, especially like Amazon does and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions around cardboard packaging. So some of the things that we uncovered in our research for that pitch was that cardboard generates the most waste in both its production, use, and disposal. And it actually has quite a high carbon footprint. So for every ton of cartons manufactured in Europe, a total of 326 kilograms of CO2 is emitted. And it's a lot of emissions. And I feel like people don't really realize that, especially when you're thinking about companies that are shipping stuff out every day to multiple people, they don't have enough recycled cardboard in their own home to actually get the reuse out of it. So they are using new boxes. Now, whether that's virgin cardboard or recycled cardboard, it is still a new box, which is a completely different impact.
Right. Yeah, I was also just thinking of like urban dwellers, you know, who don't have a lot of space to begin with. The thing comes and you're immediately like, I got to get rid of this box. And then, you know, a week later within the return like window, for example, you're like, oh, wait a second. Like I was saying, you got to go buy another box.
You got to go buy more boxes. Yeah. And I think a lot of people also didn't realize this. I know I didn't, that cardboard can't be recycled if it becomes wet or damaged. And so one of my biggest pet peeves is I'll be walking down the street, it'll be recycling day, and I'll see all the cardboard boxes just sitting on the street. And I'm like, what if it rains? I mean, anything could happen, and then all that material gets wasted. Go ahead, Steph.
Well, I'm looking out my window now. I'm here in Harlem, and tomorrow is recycling day here, tomorrow morning. And the super put out the cardboard boxes. But of course, the cardboard boxes are in a plastic bag. Okay, every week. So I'm looking at 5 clear plastic bags full of cardboard boxes. So I don't know, maybe it's protecting it from getting damaged and wet, so it could be recycled, but then what happens to those plastic bags that they're all wrapped in?
Yeah, I think there's also just a ton of misinformation about the proper way to recycle things, and especially packaging, and how it varies from municipality to municipality. But yeah, the whole putting all of your recyclables into a plastic bag, I cannot understand that, and I don't know if I ever will. But let's talk a little bit about the purpose of packaging. So I did a whole certification on packaging and what it's required and what's required of it and stuff like that. And there are really 4 things that you're looking for packaging. You want to store the product, although we're seeing a lot more of naked products, which I love, and we can certainly talk about those. You want to protect the product in transit. You want to share and highlight any important information, so like how to take care of it, any warnings, any expiration dates, and there's a branding and marketing opportunity. Apart from that, I can't really think of anything else that you would want your packaging to do.
No, well, the other thing is that it's transitory, right? It's the least permanent part of whatever you're buying. Like, even if you think about food packaging, like you want the packaging gone before the food is.
Right. And I think that's also an interesting concept, is that especially in the time of COVID, we have a lot of fear around keeping our things clean. And so one of my other biggest pet peeves in life are seeing bananas in plastic bags. I don't know if you guys have grocery stores that do that. And the first thing that people do when they get home from the grocery store, especially these days, is remove any unnecessary packaging and throw it directly into the trash. And I'm really not sure what the purpose of that packaging is at all.
Yeah, I just went to the grocery store this weekend and was in a store that I know that that's how the bananas look on the shelf. But of course, like stores that don't do that, like maybe the higher end stores, have already removed that packaging and perhaps disposed of it improperly as well. So just because I'm seeing it there on the store, yes, it annoys me. But actually, that's how bananas are shipped.
Yeah.
In these plastic and then in the cardboard boxes. It's a system.
It's a very strange system. And I think one of the things that I would love to see more on packaging that's probably falls under important information is like the proper way to recycle. And that comes back to your comment about the system, though, is that there's no standardized recycling, that you don't actually know how to kind of make that information easily accessible to everyone, because people live in different areas and each person's municipality recycles certain things and some don't. Like in my town, they don't accept bottle lids in your normal recycling. And to be quite honest, most people who live here don't know that. And so they throw it in there anyways. And I just wish that there was some kind of way to fix that system. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with like how forward logistics versus reverse logistics work, right? So forward logistics is very easy. You know, you've got a centralized product that you try to disperse, but trying to get all of those dispersed waste streams back into a centralized format is really where the challenge hits. And I know that this is something we've talked about ad nauseum. But with regards to the municipality and trying to like standardize across, you know, those dispersed streams, there have been efforts such as like how to recycle, which I think we've talked about a little bit, which is handy. It's just like, we'll talk about this later with convenience culture. It's just like, it requires another effort beyond just like throwing it in the bin. And it's, do you want to take that effort when you've already consumed the product? And packaging is already like an afterthought. Obviously there are unboxing experiences where people try to like create engagement with their packaging, but there's no like experience where you're like, I am now recycling my packaging and it's magical.
Right, or like reusing your packaging, which I think is really difficult to do, especially with plastics. Like with the glass things, sure, any pasta jar I get, pasta sauce jar I get, I'm like, I'm gonna keep this, I'm gonna use it forever. But I think with the plastics, it's a little bit harder to even imagine a reuse situation for that.
Well, because we've been conditioned to believe that this essentially forever material is actually single use, right, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I love thinking about that, how people love to frame plastics as like an evil substance, and they're actually not. Plastics are great if you use them the right way. It's the single-use plastics that we really want to get rid of.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about some fun things that are happening in the space. Let's talk about some of these innovations and solutions that are gaining popularity. And we kind of split these up into materials and models. So let's start with materials. Compostable packaging, compostables in general, are kind of making a rise in the US, but I personally don't think that it's a very effective solution. There aren't a ton of composting facilities. They don't accept, I haven't found any yet that accept compostable packaging. I don't know if you guys have any experience in this space.
No, and oh, sorry, Emma. Well, I was just going to say that I think also this fuels some of the confusion that Emma was speaking about earlier, around what to do with this packaging now that you have, it's labeled, let's say, compostable, because a lot of times the marketing for that packaging is just throw it in your backyard garden, assuming you have a backyard garden. And honestly, that confusion extends to the work I do in the fashion sector, because there are a lot of innovative materials that are bio-based materials that are also marketed as compostable, innovative and compostable. And so I get a lot of questions from consumers who are saying, well, if I buy this thing made with this compostable material, can I throw it in my vegetable garden? And the answer is no. So there's also related to compostable materials, additives too that are added, right, to plastics that make it even less recyclable.
Right.
There's no decent stream for that material, right? So yeah.
Well, it's the idea of layers, right? So, we were talking earlier about cardboard, and like cardboard can be highly recyclable. Like we talked a little bit about like various reasons that it isn't. Yeah. But one of those reasons is that like if you include a coating on that cardboard, suddenly it's useless because now it's plastics and it's multi-materials and it can't go into a single stream.
Right.
And I think that that's probably another issue beyond just whether something is compostable or not. It's like, is it mixed materials?
Yeah. And going back to the theme of fashion materials for just a minute, mono material is becoming much more popular now because of that issue, because the separation of the material at the end of life of the garment, the more materials that are in that garment, the harder it is to separate them down into the fibers and yarns for the new garment. And now a lot of apparel brands are working with supply chains to develop mono materials for that reason. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the answer for packaging or not, but
I think also that there's just a lot of confusion and not a lot of maybe regulation in this space just yet. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about bioplastics and compostables at the same time here. So bioplastics can be really misleading. Bioplastics are, in theory, a plastic-like material that's made from a renewable material. But by law, any bioplastic manufacturer only has to use 25% biomaterial to call itself a bioplastic. And that is crazy to me, because that is such a low threshold, I think. And so a lot of the conversations I've been having, especially with compostable industrial composting facilities, is, well, we don't want to take in compostables and bioplastics because we don't actually know what the material content is there, and we don't know what the rate of contamination is. And without knowing that, it's a nightmare to have to sit down and look up each individual piece of packaging and figure out, okay, well, what's actually in this?
Right.
How is it going to affect my end product compost? Can I actually put it back into the earth? And I feel like we need that regulation piece, or at least some kind of standardization piece, or maybe we just need more education. I'm trying to figure out what is like the real barrier to kind of getting this to work here.
I mean, it's like, who has power in this situation, right? So that regulation that only 25% of bioplastics actually need to come from a renewable source, like that comes because the people who are manufacturing these quote unquote bioplastics, like they had power in that regulation, and the people who are receiving these and trying to repurpose them into new materials, they did not. So it's a stakeholder engagement process. So it is a piece of education, and it is a piece of regulation, but it's more about the power and who has agency within the system and whose voice is heard, both on like an industry level and also an individual level. And
yeah, I was going to just add to that. I mean, from the industry level, right? One of other favorite topic within the subject of packaging is EPR, right? Extended producer responsibility. And so,
Steph, do you want to explain what extended producer responsibility means?
Tell the people.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I'll give a real basic explanation. I mean, it's basically like if you're going to put, if you're Coca-Cola and you're going to put a plastic bottle out there, figure out a way to get that thing back, or own the existence of it. Now that's probably not a great example because
I can help.
That's a single use scenario, right?
But
But
you're not wrong,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to talk about loop a little later, but I think that's
it's extending the responsibility.
Version.
Yeah, it's extending the responsibility past the point of sale. It's saying that once you make that sale, you're not done. You're still responsible for the materials that you put out into the environment, into the world, whatever you want to call it.
Right, you're responsible, and in order for them to take responsibility of that at end of use, even if it's a single-use product like a plastic bottle of Coke, they have to design that bottle with intent and the materials that go into it with intent, and then the system as it exists now, and design the system for the future to enable that EPR to work, to the businesses to benefit. So that obviously goes along with industry policy, which was what Emma was saying.
I think that's a huge point because right now, some of the biggest questions is who's responsible? Everyone's playing that, that meme of the Spider-Mans pointing at each other. I think about that meme all the time. It's like, no, it's your job. No, it's your job. And it's like, I agree with EPR, to be quite honest. I think that producers do need to think about who's responsible for recollecting those materials, designing those systems, and quite frankly, paying for all of that extra labor.
Like, I wonder how, I'm just going to throw this out there as a devil's advocate, like I wonder how distasteful single-use packaging using the Coke bottle would be to us if we knew that Coke was handling, the recovery of it and reusing it appropriately. I don't know how we would feel about that. I mean, right now that's not happening. And so we're like, oh, that's just another example of a single-use package. I don't know. Yeah, I could go on. I was going to just mention something around when you're talking about bioplastics. I also was starting to think of just the regular old plastic that's in the oceans, right? That's in our waterways, and the trend to mix virgin material with post-consumer waste. And figuring out that whole system of making sure you've got reliable feedstock, ideally clean, non-toxic feedstock, to create packaging from post-consumer waste. But then you have to think, well, if you create that system and products that work well in that system, are we perpetuating something we don't want to see in the world? Fossil fuel-based plastics, for example. It sort of incentivizes companies to continue to produce these plastic packages that we're upset about.
I mean, we talk about this all the time in circular economy, that it's not the be all end all, it's the transition to like true sustainability and regeneration. Right. It's just like, here's where we're at. It's terrible. Let's get to a place less terrible, and then let's get to a place that's good. But I don't know. I kind of like the synergy between the idea of circular economy and creating these interim systems, and the idea of packaging, which in itself is transitory, right? It's not something that's made to last. It's supposed to serve a very limited, finite purpose and then disappear from everything, although it never does. Disappear.
It's an interesting thought, though, about the plastic that you mentioned, Stephanie, and plastic. Like, I think there's just so much drama around plastics in general. So maybe let's switch over to glass.
Yeah.
And let's let Emma get riled up, because I know she has so much to say, working in the alcohol industry and seeing how glass is used for packaging all the time. Emma, I'm going to let you take it away.
Yeah. So as Nicole introed me, I work for a sustainable wine company. We package in all formats except glass. And that's because glass is super heavy and super fragile, and it's just like, it does some really great things with regards to protecting product, but it is less great on a lot of other fronts. Yeah, if you go into your average liquor store, it's just full of glass. And why? There's a couple reasons for that, but not all of them. Essentially, glass is extremely heavy, which means that it creates a lot of emissions when you transport it, because emissions are essentially, one of their major factors is weight times the type of fuel you use to move that weight. If you want to pare it down to like its simplest form. So if you're moving something heavy, it takes a lot more effort and emissions to do that. And then they're also incredibly hard to recycle. Like a lot of glass just like gets shattered. So we were talking about like how cardboard doesn't make it in pristine condition to recyclers. Glass likewise does not do that. And there's also like different colors of glass, like clear versus green versus dark. It's a mess.
Can't be recycled
fragile
together. Yeah.
And it's just like, why? There are alternates. Just why? I know glass is like, there's a form factor. So we were talking a little bit about how packaging serves like a marketing purpose, about communicating something important about your brand, and like glass conveys the message that it's expensive and fancy and that it's quality, and that is a dirty, rotten lie. You are paying for packaging and not product.
And I feel like that's the case with so many things in our world today, that we're paying for the packaging, not the product. I mean, to a certain degree, I think people have realized that about bottled water. But I think that if they just open their eyes a little bit more, they'd realize that in most things in life, especially if you're talking about anything branded, you're paying for packaging, not the actual product inside.
Yeah. And it's like, there are ways to do packaging that's so much better. And like, you still get that feel good experience of like, ooh, this is fancy and nice, without it also being like terrible.
Right.
Well, you guys know, when wine in bottles in glass came on board with the screw top, and everyone was like, I need the experience of opening, I need the cork to pop, please. Like, this is no good. Like, the packaging experience is not satisfactory. I love those. Now I know they're still glass. I'm sorry, Emma, but it's just so convenient. I don't have to go look for the stopper. I just screw it on, screw it off.
Well, in wine world, there's also like the whole thing about like, you won't get the proper, like it won't age properly if there's a screw top. It's just like, it's wrong. And there's this level of elitism with like tradition, right? Yeah. If you have this history and it's like, this is the way it's always been done, therefore anything that is not that is bad. And there's this, it's so frustrating that, you get tied to what has been done, that you can't see the future, and you're just like, no, this is right because it's the past, it's tradition. Right. It's like, well,
that's why I'm saying there's hope for changing the packaging, right? Because I think there's a mindset shift. At least I experienced it with my screw top wine. Just saying, but also with portability, right? I know we haven't gotten into convenience culture yet, but it's a heck of a lot easier to take a can of wine, right, to the park than a bottle.
It's also safer to take a can of wine than a bottle.
So
in general, I think I personally find canned wine delightful. I particularly enjoy canned Prosecco. So if any of my 7 followers want to send me a gift, please do. I will accept
canned
Prosecco
in for me.
Any form. But I think that there's just this, completely agree with you that there's something about this, that's the way it's always been done, and so that's the way it always will be done, and that definitely comes into convenience culture. But it also talks about, as you put in our notes, Emma, challenging the status quo. There are so many different ways to have wine delivered, and there have been for generations. You could have it, in a can, in a keg. I don't know what a bib is. I don't know if you want to share.
Bag and box. So there's a spectrum of so much. There's a spectrum of how alcohol brands are, thinking about sustainability with regards to glass packaging, because basically alcohol is packaged in glass. Some beer is in aluminum, but basically alcohol is packaged in glass, and then it's put into a cardboard box, and then it's shipped off on its merry way. And then the way that alcohol works is that typically you have a central distillery, brewery, vineyard, and that's where it's packaged. So it's not even just like shipped in meaningful quantities. It's shipped in like very small amounts. So it's an extremely inefficient system, but there's good reasons and not so good reasons for the way that that's done. But I think what's more interesting is that there are ways that people are approaching this. So some people, like the big wine players, like your Gallows, they're lightweighting their bottles. So instead of having heavy glass bottles, you have glass bottles that are a little bit more lightweight, which is a cool materials innovation. Then recently, Diageo and Absolut came out with paper bottles, which is super exciting. And I'm very curious to see how the market reacts to that, because that is like, you're keeping the form the same, but the material has changed, which is going to be.
I haven't seen those.
But Diageo in particular has gotten a huge amount of play for like their innovation and like not only doing a paper bottle, but putting Johnny Walker in that paper bottle.
A classic, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, which is super exciting to see.
And my dad drinks Johnny Walker Black Label, like that is his go-to drink. And I sent him that article showing that they were doing it in a paper box. And he was actually excited about it. So I'm hopeful that the status quo is changing, that this whole idea of like having the feel of a glass bottle or having like the unboxing experience with their 18 layers of tissue paper, like hopefully that is going away, because those are fleeting moments. If you really think about it.
There's also like an interesting piece about like right size and packaging. So we didn't talk about this previously, but one of the things that brought us together as a trio was receiving packages in the mail that was perhaps a single item within a massive box for no reason whatsoever, beyond like you had to hit a shipping minimum, and they decided that the extra like $2 thing that you put in the box deserved its own personal box. That was massive.
The night before our pitch, I received a pen, a single pen in a box that is bigger than my laptop. And I lost it. And I channeled that rage for our pitch presentation. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because you have dimensions on the product and you're like, these are the sizes of the boxes I have, this is the dimension of the product that's listed in the system. It's an optimization problem, and it makes sense from like a numbers perspective. It does not make sense from any other perspective whatsoever.
You're taking me back, Emma, because now I was just thinking, our one of our ideas was around 3D printing the packaging so that it conformed to the shape, right? So that it, obviously you were goes way beyond lightweighting and actually just conforms to the size of the thing and some protective shell. But
I mean,
taking me back.
You're talking about right sizing, and that's kind of something that's been increasing, especially as you see D2C sales increasing. It's the idea that you're creating this custom unboxing experience, and sure, it creates cost on the producer end, but it also can create a lot of brand value, which as we've discussed is the purpose of packaging. So if you're right sizing your boxes based on your however many configurations that you tend to ship out, then you're reducing the unnecessary emissions from shipping giant packages.
Right, and aren't you reducing your costs as well if you're right sizing the shipping? So the amount of money, potentially, I don't know that it completely offsets the cost of creating that more customized packaging or not.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I remember one of the conversations that we had in our interviews for that project was kind of about how, well, why does that happen? And one of the things that was brought up was, well, the whole logistics portion that plays a part into it. So if you're controlling the logistics, then you also want to optimize your route and your deliveries and the space in that truck. So sometimes for the load that you're packing in the truck, which is something that I think a lot of people don't think about, is okay, fine, I have a pen in a giant box and that's irritating, but that pen that was put in a box was put in a truck that was packed to the brim so that nothing would move and nothing would fall. And so that's a whole added layer that people, I think, forget about when they're thinking about why the hell did this come to me this way?
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I mean, we do have to go back to the fact that packaging is needed to protect the thing that's theoretically of more value than the packaging, even if the packaging has, its own embedded emissions. That's a concern.
I think it's important to remember also, because if the packaging is not functioning to protect that item, that I find to be actually kind of worse, because then you have to do the whole process all over again.
Yeah. You have to make another widget and ship it out.
It's a good time to be working in sustainable packaging.
Lots of problems to solve, ladies. Lots of problems.
Lots of opportunities.
Yes. Better put.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about our favorite models, because that's the part that really excites me. I think the materials are cool, but I'm always more enticed by the models, and that probably comes from working in logistics, and thinking about all the ways that we can use the existing systems. Let's start with reusables and refillables. Let me back up. There are two types of models, reusables and refillables, where the consumer maintains ownership over the packaging. And then packaging as a service, which is something we all love to talk about, which is where your brand or a third party has ownership over that piece of packaging. So some examples of reusable and refillables are like bringing your own coffee mug to Starbucks, taking your own tote bags to the grocery store. I have a set of bamboo utensils that I love and I carry with me everywhere. Going to bulk grocery stores, which are few and far between, but I really hope one comes to my neighborhood. And then some specific brands of refillables are things like Blue Land, which is a company that does cleaning products. And I love that concept because their whole gimmick is, why are you paying for the shipping on a bottle of liquid when you have water in your house? Here's a tablet where you can make your own product. Algramo, Steph, did you write that one?
Yeah, Algramo is won numerous awards. I don't have the backstory top of mind right now, but they've come up with a solution that's like a mobile refillable station for underserved communities. Actually, I think the founder started up in, not sure where in Latin America he started it up, but basically, maybe it was in Mexico. But the idea is that often these communities are purchasing single-use sachets of, let's say, laundry detergent or something like that. And of course, that waste builds up over time. So he came up with this refillable model. It's essentially a refillable, it's a mobile station that comes to the neighborhood, so, but they're rolling it out in New York, and I can't remember where else they're rolling it out in North America, I think.
And then I think we're also seeing this for a lot of like cosmetics. So you mentioned L'Oreal and Sephora might be working on this. I know that Kaya Weiss has a refillable model. Ethique, Emma, did you just add that one?
Yeah, I did. They're they're more in the naked category, but their whole thing is like, they do shampoo bars and conditioner bars. Instead of like having a bottle of shampoo and conditioner, you have like this teeny tiny little cardboard box that's compostable, which we talked about, but it's still a lighter cardboard box and it has no plastic. And so you're like literally just buying the shampoo soap instead of the bottle of shampoo that is mostly water. Like you look at your shampoo or conditioner bottle, and it's the first ingredient is water.
Yeah, and I think what's really key about all of these is that, you maintain and you're responsible for keeping that packaging, making sure it gets cleaned and all of that, which is very different from packaging as a service where you just basically swap out. Some of our favorite examples are Loop Store, which a lot of people are familiar with, but if you're not, it's a new service run by TerraCycle where they've partnered with, I think, over 70 household brands to bring you like common items. So like Haagen-Dazs ice cream, laundry, shampoo, all kinds of things.
It's like for people like you who don't have a bulk store near you, it's so that you can get your items in bulk. That being said, I love Loop. I love their model. It is not accessible. Like if we're talking about, like, we're going to get into convenience culture, but part of the reason that the packaging system works is because it is exceptionally cheap. It is so cheap to do packaging in cardboard and single-use plastic, single-use. It's so unbelievably cheap.
That's right.
That it's like, why would you do anything else?
Right.
It's actually more than 10 times cheaper. I know because I've been bringing a lot of packaging solutions to my clients, and the difference is between like 6 cents and $1.10. And it's, who's going to pay that,
Yeah, no, I've been costing similar things for the company I work for. And it's just like, why is this, I want to do better. And it makes absolutely no sense because ultimately, like, I'm in operations, I'm responsible for GM. It's like, I'm not going to make this decision.
Yeah.
I am not incentivized to make this decision.
But what we often hear in this sort of the access over ownership models, like a packaging as a service model, is that the economies of scale will ultimately bring the cost down. Like over time, this will lower. And I'm with you. I'm okay. That needs to happen. I mean, I think for the impact to be felt the way it's advertised as being impactful, it does need to scale and grow. So perhaps when that time comes, if that time comes, costs will come down. But
I mean,
until now, yeah, I mean, I don't use it, even though I believe in it.
Same, it's way out of my price range.
So
yeah. I mean, one thing I think about with regards to like we talk a lot about the sustainability tax on these solutions, but I think about, did you guys watch Mad Men ever?
Yeah.
Do you remember the episode when they were doing the ad for Pampers?
Yes.
The disposable diapers, and they were so expensive. And it's like, nobody has reusable diapers. Nobody uses cloth diapers anymore. I mean, people do, but in general, you buy your Pampers, it's fine. But it's like, that's the model. It went from like way too expensive that you're like, oh my God, I should be reusing this, to coming down in cost and becoming so popular because of that convenience factor, because it was just so nice not to have to worry about any of this, that it made sense for more and more people. Of course, there were like simultaneous economic trends that enabled that, like the middle class, the growth of the middle class, which no longer exists if it ever did, but that's a topic for another time.
Well, let's dive into the convenience culture, because I
think we're dancing around it. We're being impatient.
And it's where we should have started.
We had to set up the stage and make sure that we're qualified experts who know things about packaging, and so now we can rant fully. We have a lot of feels about convenience culture. So we all recently attended a digital conference, and there was a panel, and they were talking about this competition to redesign the plastic bag, and there was just a lot of feels. I think I fully lost it when a comment was made about, well, we still need plastic bags, because what happens if someone comes to our store and they forget their reusable bags? Like, we need to have something to offer them. And I was just like, no, I'm done catering to the convenience culture. If we keep having options for them, people are going to keep using those options. And I'm going to take a pause and take a breath and let you guys dive in with anything that you think.
I mean, I don't quite know even where to start. I mean, I think a lot of these initiatives are, I don't want to devalue them, because they're trying to fix something. They're not doing nothing.
Right.
And there's value there, but I think ideally what we all want is to see a redesign of the system and the culture that's perpetuated the need for that single-use bag. And I just feel that, we've reached a point where, because society doesn't value the things that, frankly, as we've been slowing down during the pandemic, I think more people are valuing, but in general, in normal times, pre-pandemic, society doesn't value, your boss wouldn't value you leaving work early to go to the grocery store, and, maybe going to the grocery store, instead of buying for the week, you go to the grocery store every day to pick up your evening meal. I mean, I could probably carry that in my arms if I forgot my reusable tote.
Exactly.
But, because society is not like, it's important that you eat well, that you take care of yourself and your family. It's like you're rushing to this thing and to the other thing, and you're like, oh, I forgot to buy something. I'm getting off the train. Let me just go in there and get something. Oh, I forgot my bag. Okay, give me the plastic bag, because I have to now carry all this stuff home. I'm rambling, but I would rather see the value system change.
Yes.
That's perpetuated this need for a better plastic bag.
And go ahead.
No, that's all right.
Jump in. No, I think there are two parts to this, right? One of which is that even if, as you say, Nicole, we stop catering to this, it's like, well, but this is a differentiator. People want to do less work in terms of like their daily errands, right? It's not meaningful, it is annoying, and it's just like, I want this to be as minimally annoying as possible. It's like, sure, don't cater to that, but then also, like, what is the solution to not cater to that and still recognize that this is a very human reaction to just like not want to have to think about it? And The other piece of this, I think, is perhaps gender, which is that women tend to carry around bags as a rule. Like we have purses, we have whatever with us, and we can put a few bonus items in there in general. Like most of us are not carrying overstuffed purses, or some of us carry teeny tiny purses, but not always. And I think that that's kind of an interesting take that we can dive into more, or we can dive into offline. But I think that's another thing is like men typically don't carry bags. And the convenience culture, like I don't have an issue when I try to buy like a couple bonus items, you know, out and about. It's because I have a bag on me.
Yeah.
It's my purse.
I think though that there's a lot of thoughts that I have here. One is the culture part of this, right? That there is a culture that we have built, especially in this country, about like, oh, here's your drink, immediately hand you a straw. Oh, are you buying something? Like, even if it's like, we went to the mall the other day, which, whoa, by the way, guys, went to a
You
mall.
were in a
the other
mall?
day. I was in a mall.
Wow. There's still a mall that's open.
What happened? Was it like cobwebs? It was
No, there were people there. We could have that chat later.
A whole nother episode.
Like,
episode.
Oh
So we
my
went to the
God.
mall, and I went to Sephora to buy like a replacement concealer, and she went and like immediately started to put it in one of those bags, and I was like, no, you don't have to do that. So I think there's a lot of undoing of habits that need to happen. That is part of a culture, maybe, of the whole straw thing. It just drives me nuts. It's like, if I'm receiving a drink, I don't need a straw. And we can certainly do another whole episode on habits in this country of things like sitting down and immediately being presented with a full glass of water without being asked for it. Again, another story.
Oh yeah, that's reminding me of the bread in restaurants. Now, sometimes you don't automatically get that anymore, but you used to. Anyway.
well, but like so talking about that just slightly, I think that there's actually an interesting innovation that's happening here, in part because of COVID, right? So if you think about how folks are kind of buying now, there's a shift to online and context delivery and curbside, which means that you're being intentional in how you're ordering. And people have actually switched to the nudge idea of like default is contactless or default is utensil-less, right? So they're shifting the default. And because you have to make the physical effort and it's not a face-to-face interaction, you have to make an active choice. I think that there is actually an interesting innovation happening there, as we're seeing through COVID.
I would love to see that. Yeah.
I mean, have you all ordered like from online takeout recently?
I have.
Yeah. Has there been like an option for like, you've had to uncheck the box for contactless delivery and you've had to uncheck the box for utensils?
I have, and
they never follow it though.
Exactly.
So I don't even look. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
I still get utensils
get.
despite like putting it in the comments, please don't send utensils, like unchecking the box and everything, because it's a habit. When you pack the order, you throw the utensils in.
That's super interesting because I have not received utensils.
I'm moving to where you live.
Please come.
Everyone's
welcoming
more
you with
intentional
open
there
arms.
where you live, apparently.
But I think that that's an interesting culture thing. And like, so going back to what Stephanie said about going grocery shopping every day, in India, that's not an unusual concept. Like you go down and you have like in Europe, you have like just a vegetable stand on your corner. Even in New York, there used to be the produce guys on almost every corner.
Yeah.
Just go down, buy what you need, and then make your dinner that night and do that every day, every other day. It's not a big deal. But in this country, it's like, no, I'm going to the grocery store today and I'm not going again for 2 weeks, you know?
Right, because you don't have that time. And you don't have that time because society doesn't value you spending your time doing those kinds of things. I mean, we're rushed constantly so that we're always like, I've got to order online because I don't have time to go to a store, you know?
But it's even like, I think it goes beyond that.
It's less about, at least for me, my perspective is that it's, yes, there are things that we do day to day that are annoying, these sort of mundane errands and technology and the opportunity to get something online rather than having to take the time to go. I get that. And I'm with you there, but I think it's just gotten out of hand to the point where now any effort at all is like, oh my God, I can't possibly.
But it's because the option has presented itself to not expend effort. So I think there are ways to leverage that for good. So for example,
yeah, I could see that.
I am one of those people. I grew up outside of a city where there is not a produce stand on every corner. And so it was like the weekly grocery shop. It was a one-time, it wasn't like every night. It was it was a process. You made a list, you shopped,
Correct.
there was a routine to it. And, you know, I live in a city now, and like it presents itself as an option to go produce shopping every week. But with COVID, like I switched to an online delivery service because I did not want to go to the grocery store or see people. So I think that there is an opportunity here for that shift. Yeah, and I think there are ways to make it more productive. And by productive, I mean more friendly. Like the grocery delivery service that I use, like they had a packaging collection program for their boxes, which they've discontinued because of COVID and the concerns around reusables. And we can dive into that. But I think that there are things that can be done with technology, and like accepting that people have these tendencies and then leveraging them in a useful way, in a way that is less destructive.
I completely agree with you. And I think that there is an opportunity for just being aware to how we are being more intentional. So it's not like anymore like, oh shit, I don't have tomatoes. Like I'm just going to run out, or I'm going to grab them on my way home from work. And then you're suddenly standing there with 2 tomatoes in your hand because you don't have a bag for them. Now it's like, okay, well, I'm planning that I'm going to leave my apartment on this day with my hand sanitizer and my reusable bag. So I think that there is an opportunity for a return to intentionality like you're talking about. Here's hoping.
Well, and it's like, you know, the routine is now that you go out with your mask. That was not a difficult thing to adjust to. I mean, yes, it was. People are fighting against it for various reasons that are related to senses, like, but it was, by and large, it was not a difficult adjustment to make, to just be like, oh, I'm going outside, let's put on a mask. And there's a norm there that it's like, if you go outside your front door and you don't have a mask on, you're going to get looks from people on the street like, what's wrong with you? You are.
That's the moral of the story. Stare at people in your grocery stores if they don't have reusable bags.
No. You don't stare at people. The cashiers stare at you. It's this, you like getting inside the system. It's the cashier. It's like going back to what you were saying. Don't coddle. Don't coddle. The cashiers are staring at you for not bringing your reusable bag.
I laughed so hard when, like, I know Jersey City and I think New York might have done it as well. They were like, oh, we'll just put like a fee on plastic bags, like a 10-cent fee. I'm like, that's not going to deter people.
Well, New York did the ban and then they did the fee on the paper.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we have thicker plastic bags that are called reusable bags, but you have to pay for them.
I mean, it's like thicker plastic, meaning that like plastic is a forever material, and like you can reuse it up to, I think those thicker bags are 100 times is their rating. Yeah.
But the people still forget them, you know, and
of course. I'm not going to take around a plastic bag in my bag. It's my bag of bags.
Everyone has a bag of bags.
Everyone has a bag of bags.
That's what's insane. It's like, I always have a bag on me. So it's like, why would I take an extra bag?
Yeah. Well, lots to think about with convenience culture. I'm not sure if you guys have any more thoughts. I mean, obviously we're not going to solve this today, because if we could, we would. But I think that it is important for people to think about how they're shopping, how much waste they're generating in that shopping, and if there are alternatives that they could kind of slowly start to incorporate into their lives. Like, for example, I get really irritated when people are like, oh, I ran out of toilet paper, I'll just order it on Amazon. I'm like, there's a corner store down the street. We can go pick up toilet paper. So I think even just being more mindful of when you're indulging in convenience culture could be a nice first step for people to take away from this conversation. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, are you really too busy to make coffee at home and put it in your reusable mug? Do you really? I'm just saying, no offense to Starbucks and the coffee shops out there that everybody loves, but yeah, I could leave it there.
Emma, any closing thoughts?
I think that it's not at an individual level. It's not about individual preferences. It's about designing a system that encourages people to make choices that are better for society as a whole. So it's not about like whether or not you make coffee at home. It's about whether, like, are we facilitating making coffee at home? Are we facilitating you getting whatever product you need in the least amount of packaging possible? and creates the least amount of waste possible. It's like, are we creating those systems that facilitate those better choices at a consumer level and at a, B2B level?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think about that all the time, which has to come first, the system or the demand? And I'm always of the opinion that they kind of have to happen at the same time.
Oh, of course. One drives the other. Of course.
Maybe we need, at the airport, how they have those water bottle refill stations. Maybe this is our next $1 billion idea, guys. What if we make those, but for coffee in subway stations? I'll edit this part out.
Wow.
But also, like, that's what Coke and Pepsi are doing. They're shifting their business models to that. That's why Pepsi bought SodaStream, is because they're like, fuck, nobody's buying sugary drinks, and two, people are shifting away from single-use plastics. So let's buy SodaStream because that is in-home DIY. Like, that was their strategic move, which I thought was brilliant. And I'm like, cool, let's go work for Pepsi. Also, but I do like Coke better, which is terrible. I think Pepsi does better things, but Coke is tastier.
Yeah, much.
You're still editing this out, right?
We'll see. On that note, I just wanted to leave it with you guys. If you had any last closing words for our viewers, this has been so fun and lively. And I know I could sit here for another hour and a half talking to you guys about packaging, but we all have lives and things and private conversations to get to. But I just wanted to leave it with you guys. Any last closing words? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, what a spot.
What's your one takeaway from today, you think?
My one takeaway from today.
Crickets, apparently. No, my takeaway is that it's not just doing technology to get out of it, right? It's not just figuring out the compostables or the bioplastics. It's also figuring out the models and changing the behavior in order to make sure that as a society, as a culture, as people living in the US, we are part of a system that is actually working towards good instead of working towards ill.
I guess I'll add on the systems note that I think it's really important that we're not designing more Band-Aids for a broken system, that we really, as we are designing incremental improvements, if that's where we are right now, that's better than not moving forward, but understand that they're incremental, and that to sort of jump to the real systems change, we really have to look more closely at the system that's been failing us. So designing a different plastic bag or designing some other packaging to work better in a broken system, I don't think really helps us in the long run.
I think I'll add my last little 2 bits on this. My big takeaway from today is that it's going to be really exciting and interesting to see kind of what happens in this space and how we examine lots of different systems, because obviously the solutions that are working for me in a city are not going to work for people in the middle of America or in other parts of the world. And I think it's really important that we keep that in mind. And even though we live in a world of global corporations that are selling the same product all over the planet, I think that needs to be re-examined and really think about what's going to work based on different situations. So that's kind of my
bringing accessibility to the system.
Yeah,
is going to be important.
Yeah. Fuck the sustainability tax.
What a
closing thought. Fuck the sustainability tax.
All right. Do I have to top that now?
No, you don't.
Okay.
Thank you both so much for being on the show and for being my season 2 closer. I couldn't think of a better way to wrap things up this season than talking about my personal passion. And for everyone else who's watching, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole. Bye.